This video took 2 days to make, and to be honest, there's a bit of time skipping through the video, jumping between the first day and the second day for very good reason. A lot of things changed with some of the things with this cooler, but you're gonna have to watch and find out what the whole story is. And by the end of the video, you'll understand why we did it this way. Back to you yesterday, Nick. Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. Height sent over a bunch of stuff like some new fans and some lighting stuff, and they sent over this, and I thought this was one of the most interesting things I've seen in a while. We saw this at Computex last year. Well, we didn't, but we had people tell us they saw it. It's called the Thick Q60, and it's a 240mm liquid cooler. How boring. Except this isn't like any other liquid cooler you've seen before. I think the only way to show you what's different with this cooler is to do a build with this thing so you guys can see it firsthand. But before that, here's a word from today's video sponsor.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDKey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDKey.com for 1/10 of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
Usually when it comes to getting stuff, Claire talks to all the companies and she says, yeah, we'll do stuff, whatever. And I don't really think about what's coming until I go and start planning a video and open the box. And today was one of those times where I was like, oh, we got this stuff from Hyde, I want to check it out. And I pulled it out of the box and you're about to see this. And you've probably seen this around social media before. Wow, that is really thick. I wish we'd captured my initial reaction, but this cooler is stupid. Look at this thing. It's like a 240mm radiator. The radiator is about the thickness of if you had a push-pull fan configuration on a normal radiator. It's absurd. Look at this thing. It is bonkers. I love it. It's so cool and unnecessary. I don't know why I thought this was so funny, but it's just so weird. But it's not the only thing. It's got an iPhone on it. Look how ridiculous this thing is. It's like an iPhone with RGB on the back. I gotta say, like, it looks cool, but I don't know if you need this. But like, yeah, it is cool and it is different, and I like different. It's also got pre-applied thermal paste. Whether or not that is the most efficient pattern for thermal paste application, we're yet to see, because I can tell you now for a fact that a lot of IHSs are smaller than that application pattern, and a lot of it might end up going to waste. But we'll test that with the thermals anyway. Oh, what do you mean I was swearing about something? I just was looking at the wiring earlier as well, and I thought there was a couple interesting things, because Height's trying to do a little bit of a Corsair with their connection setup with, like, they're calling it, what is it?
Nexus Link.
Nexus Link, right? And it's like IQ Link, okay, I get it. But also something that I noticed is they're using PCIe power for this cooler and fan combo as well, which is something that Corsair is doing. And I think this might start to become the future. And there's a couple of reasons why I think something like this is kind of the right way to go. The first reason is, I think that PCIe power connectors, especially 6-pin ones, are more compact than other power connectors. And given the NVIDIA GPUs now use 12-volt high power, you're not really using PCIe power connectors in the traditional sense anymore. I mean, unless you don't have a 40 series card, and of course you are, but most of the time you'll still have a spare PCIe power connector. Not only that, more power can go through these cables too. So the more intricate your lighting setup becomes, the more power you're able to deliver to the lighting and cooling solution, everything like that. So I do think this is kind of the way to go. And I said that last year when Corsair started doing it, that it's probably about time that we switched from SATA power connectors to things like this. This is another thing I thought was really cool too. It's got like dual USB-C connectors for it as well. And it just plugs in. Like, easy, right? And then you got like your USB cable for controlling it in Nexus Link. And then you've got this PWM cable to control the fan speed for everything. And the pump is in the radiator for this as well. So all the people out there who love to comment on cooler installation videos talking about, oh, tubes up or tubes down. If the pump is in the radiator, it doesn't fucking matter. That's why all the marketing stuff and all the pictures you see of this cooler already are tubes up, because it doesn't matter. Anyway. Now, I will say from the get-go, the Q60 is about $300 US, which is a bit on the high side for a cooler. But like I said, the only way I could show you guys what I think is cool about it is by doing a build. So let's do a build with this absurd cooler. Look at this thing, I'm sorry. Every time I see it, I'm like, what the heck? And like this, I saw people talking about this at Computex last year and I'm like, yeah, cool. But actually seeing it, it's so dumb. But I wonder what the thermal performance is like. Let's find out that too. You don't need to remove the cover with the thermal paste that's pre-applied for the cold plate to change the brackets. This is one of the first coolers that I've seen that's done this, and it's just a very simple solution. They should do this with every cooler. But to remove these brackets, there's no screws or anything required. Essentially what you do is you grab the edge of the mounting bracket and you can kind of give them a bit of a jiggle to slide them out. And then you just slide in whichever compatible one you want. And it's good. Look, this is an AMD Intel bracket now. The fan orientation is the correct way, like out of the box. I would suggest, now hear me out, I would suggest with a side mounted radiator like this big old thick thing that you have these set to exhaust. So I know there would be a lot of debate with people saying, hey, exhaust is bad because all you're doing is pumping all of that hot air into your system. Well, you're kind of half right, but the thing that makes that wrong really is it's not about the temperature of the air that flows, it's about the air flowing, right? And that's why it's called airflow, not hot airflow or cold airflow, because the temperature does not matter. The fact that air moves through the system is the most important thing. Always remember to take off your cold plate cover, otherwise you're gonna hate your life. Just pop that off. You're not really locked to one orientation with it. You've got this whole range of movement to move the screen around whichever way you like, which means like if you kind of wanna angle it that way or whatever to stop reflections, you can do that. Not only that, where are all the wires that are going to the pump top and cold plate? Well, there aren't any because they're contained within the sheathing of the tubes, which I think is very, very nice. It's about time that we see more coolers with no wiring to the pump top. Well, to be honest, the pump is in the radiator for this, but you get what I'm trying to say. thermals for the Height Thick Q60. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thermals are actually quite good for this cooler, and to be honest, it is quite unexpected. The interesting thing is we've tested this CPU so much here on the channel that I can tell you for a fact that these thermals are exceptionally good for the 7800 X3D. Traditionally, like I've said many times with these type of videos, this CPU just doesn't get hot. I also included GPU thermals here just so you can get a bit of an idea of what the restriction is like with the case, as well as me choosing not to install fans on the bottom as intake. This is completely up to you when you build a system like this. And today I was like, you know what, like typically with these fish tank builds, it is something that we do, but today, yeah, you know, change it up a little bit. Now, here's the most interesting thing. Like this build is not about the case at all because we've already reviewed it. What this is about is the cooler. And with the Thick Q60 and the Nexus software from Height, there's a couple really big issues right now. And it kind of makes me wonder why Height released a product like this or a series of products like this with these screens and software control. And the software is kind of not really up to the task of doing everything it's supposed to do. So first of all, when we take a look at Nexus and the way it works with this cooler, everything is a little bit antiquated and there's no real place for things. So say for instance, like we want to create a new layout for the screen, like this is pretty standard. You can load your own backgrounds in, like do all the normal stuff you can do with coolers, with screens, but there are weird little bits for the settings. Now, with the Height software, I noticed this with the Y70, if you want to configure the screen, it's a settings page called Faces, right? And basically that just allows you to control the screens. Okay, I get it. But they kind of hide the settings for the most important thing for a cooler, fan speed and pump speed. Considering it's kind of non-standard, like it has a PWM connector, but there's no individual control for both of those things, even if you decide to use motherboard mode for the cooler, which I just think is a bit strange. Secondly, there's like firmware control, and then there's Nexus control for fan and pump speed as well. But it's all over the place. What I did initially was the cooler has another expansion port to plug in other fans. So say for instance, like this build here, there's 5 fans in total. And the 2 fans are automatically connected when they're sitting on the radiator. So you don't need to wire up the fans, but it uses USB-C for everything. And I'm sure it's a regular USB-C connector, but it's not wired as actual USB-C. Anyway, getting off topic. The top fans, I plugged it into that spare expansion port, which is that USB-C port, and the fans would just ramp up and do whatever they wanted. Now, if you release a product, at least have the basic functionality of the things that are in the box. Not only did Height send over like some extra fans, they sent over some RGB strips and like they have like their own lighting control and all this stuff that works with the software, but there's nowhere to control the RGB strips. So like my plan initially was to leave it in Unicorn's View anyway, because the case looks amazing. Like there's no arguing with how this case looks, right? You either love it or you really hate it. And I kind of love how this looks, but not my cup of tea. Anyway, besides the point. The fact that I can't just control the RGB strips, like it's not obvious anyway. Maybe it's there, but it's really not obvious. And I'm a guy who does lots of PC builds, lots of different RGB software. And if I can't find it, what chance does a regular person have trying to find this setting? So, yeah, I like just a bit of feedback for Height. Like you guys are making some really cool looking stuff right now. And like the screen on this cooler is amazing. Come on guys, if you're gonna release these products, at least have the software somewhat working properly with everything that it supports, right? I'm not saying the software is terrible. I think what they're trying to do is make it a bit too gamery and memeify it a little bit too much. It seems a little bit amateur. They could do a lot better. Please, Height, do a bit better with the software. The other thing is, if it's user error, I'm willing to say that I'm wrong. But there's just so many silly UI and UX choices here. It's the next day and I decided to kind of sleep on my thoughts for what I thought about this whole new Height ecosystem. And this morning I came into the studio, fired up the PC, and I was gonna start shooting B-roll. I noticed there was a software update and some firmware update stuff that came out overnight. And I found that they fixed a lot of the usability issues that I was having with this cooler. So setting fan curves and just being able to make the fans on the cooler and the pump do whatever you like in the software. But I'm gonna double down and just say that the user experience just really isn't that good still. So like a lot of what I said yesterday, I will cut out because it's now null and void. But the main thing I was trying to drive home is, you know, not recommending the cooler because of the software implementation. And now I can't really say that because it's like the universe was like, hey, you know, this thing's gonna get ripped in half. You know, let's put out a software update. And I didn't speak to height between that time because we're on completely different time zones. So there would have been no opportunity for that to have lined up for them to do something anyway. It's been like maybe 15 hours or something like that. So yeah, a lot of what I was ranting about that I probably cut out, or maybe I'll leave some of it in just to give you guys a bit of context, is I can now take back some of what I said because, like I said when I filmed that part yesterday, if I'm wrong about something, I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong about the UX with the software. Now, let's take a look at this, for example, now that we've got the cooler working properly. When we want to set up cooling, this interface is, like, it makes sense to me, and it makes sense to software developers, and it probably makes sense to people who use DaVinci Resolve or people who make scripts in Unreal Engine. But for regular people out there, this isn't going to make sense. Like, it's like, what do I do here? Like, why am I drawing lines between things and like setting up curves this way? A lot of it just doesn't make sense to regular people. I think what companies forget is that not everyone's an expert, not everyone's an enthusiast. So yeah, like even Corsair iQ, I hate to say it, is easier to use than this. And I think the example I gave yesterday was NZXT Cam. Everything's got its own section, and you click on it, you do the setting, and it does the thing. For this, I can show you this, but they have a setting called cooling, and everything's just like in this menu, and now you can like adjust things and do all this stuff and whatnot. I don't know how they managed to get this out overnight, but yeah, I still think it's quite confusing. I personally think it's cool and it's a really nice idea, but it's like having to learn something completely different. You know, maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. I don't hate this idea. I just don't think it's the best way to do it, right? Like I said, I really like Height products. I love the quality of their stuff. It's a bit expensive for the regular person, but again, like, yeah, the UX is terrible. Even little things like the layout for the interface in their Nexus software, you've got these tiles. This is like Windows 8 kind of stuff going on here, guys. Like, we're past this tile layout. Your UX person must really love Windows 8. Anyway, so you've got these tiles of like all the settings and whatnot, and let's just say, let's go into the Faces tab, right? So when you are in this, right, and you're doing your settings and you're done doing your settings, for me, looking at this as someone who uses tech all the time, there's no obvious way to go back, right? Like, oh, how do I actually go back from this? And then you've come to find that once you have it open, you click on the background to go back. That's weird. Just put a little X in the corner just to close it down. Like it's one tiny little UX tweak. Because to be honest, like if I'm rushing around doing things and when I first use this software, I'm just like, how do I go back? And then I press escape and it goes back. And I'm like, oh, I guess escape is the key. That's a weird choice, but turns out you just click on the background. So this is set up, right? So you're seeing this as me like having tweaked it. But when you first open this, none of this makes sense, right? Unless you start dragging things around and, you know, it's, yeah, I'm not trying to purposely hate on it, but yeah, it is confusing. The other thing I found was quite interesting was the lighting controller off the rip yesterday, just was not working at all. Didn't detect the fans, didn't detect anything. Just going back to the RGB, I know I get a little bit sidetracked sometimes. Now, when I go into the RGB settings, I've left it on Unicorn Spew because I think it kind of suits this build, to be honest. It shows like the cooler in here, which it didn't show yesterday at all, right? And that kind of pissed me off. It now shows the 2 RGB strips that I've got running through here. But at the same time, they've tried to do things kind of like Corsair iCUE, where you can create groups and layers and all that kind of stuff and set it up that way. But again, there's no obvious way to see this. And if you use Photoshop every single day like Claire, I'm guessing you would see that and be like, okay, I know exactly what that is. But if you're not a designer or someone who uses this kind of software, how are you going to know it's there? At least with Corsair iCUE, it shows all of the devices, everything plugged in a list with layers that are right there. But like, why hide this? Why have like a little icon? Yeah, like it's cool to have a little icon and you can keep it open, but why not just have it open from the jump and not have it over like this configurable RGB surface and stuff like that? So like all these little design tweaks they should be making just to make it a little bit easier for everyone. Like, I'm not trying to purposely complain. I just want them to think about just normal people using stuff, right? I just picked the camera up because there was one last thing that I wanted to mention, and it's about the lighting effect inside the case. The Unicorn Spew effect that is default for this controller is really, really good, but there's no way to go back to that once you have the software running and you have all of the lighting set up. Like, Height, give us an option just to go back to pure Unicorn Spew, because your Unicorn Spew looked really good and now it looks, as the kids say, pretty mid.
Flashback.
The thing is, the Thick Q60 is a gorgeous cooler. Not only that, the performance, from what I can tell, is very good for what it is, especially for a 240ml liquid cooler. It does have that bonus of having much thicker fans and a much thicker radiator. But again, I gotta say it, like, if you're gonna release a product, it has to be a complete product. It can't have like one part of it being beta. I've roasted Cooler Master for the exact same thing. I continue to roast them for this kind of thing. And all the feedback that comes back from Cooler Master has been like that they're working on it and they're trying to do better. So I hope we hear the same thing from Height here too, because $299 USD for this cooler in the state that it's in now, which would be around 450 Aussie dollars with a, I'm gonna call it an incomplete product. I can't recommend it. Honestly, I can't. So yeah.
End of flashback.
I guess the real question is, after sleeping on it and coming back to it the next day, have my thoughts changed on the Q60? And I'm gonna say yes, for one reason. I don't know how they've done it or like how they knew that this video was gonna come out, but overnight the software changed a little bit and it's enough for it to be perfectly controllable. And I said, like, maybe it was user error, maybe I'm an idiot, maybe I'm big dumbs, but the instructions that they sent us, I followed yesterday and, you know, it just didn't work. Anyway, the only issue I have still is it's $299 US for essentially a 240ml liquid cooler with an iPhone on it. So that's still a little bit expensive. The comparison with this is stuff like the Kraken, which is $259 on a good day, and coolers like the Corsair H100i LCD, which is, I think, around the same thing, like maybe $269 or $249, like in that price range. So I understand where Height's coming from with the pricing, making it a little bit higher because of the bigger screen and additional lighting and whatnot. But I still think that for a solution, there are better options, but the thermal performance is damn impressive for this cooler. So, you know, there is that too. I'm gonna go back to past Nick, and maybe he said something with a bit more of a morsel of integrity or whatever he said back then yesterday. The other thing is, it's a big part of my job here on YouTube to be honest with you guys as well and to be non-biased. I don't hate Height. We've given all of their cases really great reviews because the quality of these cases is pretty unmatched at this point in time. yeah, they're a bit more expensive, but you're getting what you pay for. These cases are fantastic. But when it comes to companies typically who make cases and they have a software solution for lighting, there's always a bit of a disconnect there with teams that work on these things. And I feel like it's a little bit of history repeating itself, right? So I don't want to come off as me hating this, because I don't, because I think it could be really, really good. It's a very thin line that we tread here. I want companies to do good things and make exciting products, and it's just so close to being good. Yeah. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. This is a weird, cooler build video. You peak, we seek, and I'm out of here. You've heard enough of me. Here's Bindi. We've had you for such a long time, and you're gonna be 9 years old in a couple weeks, Bindi. And you're still as cute as the day that I first met you, when we adopted you 3 years ago. Isn't that right, Bindi? Isn't that right? You're still as cute as the first day when the cat stalk delivered you. And except when you lick your bum. Oh, you love that mum of yours too much. It makes me a little bit jealous, I'm not gonna lie.
You're eight.
She's showing you her angry Bengal side.
My angry child.
She really is.
Cute.
She's so cute.
No.
She's like the hidden thing in our house that we just can't help but like love, because she's so cute.
Baby.
She's a maniac.
Doro.
You're a freak. Whoa.
Vacuum the floor for Mum, please.
Yeah, it looks like it needs it.
It needs a vacuum. It's yucky because she rolls on it.
Hey, bye, Bindi. Bye.